A great follower of our channel, Joseph Mendoza, made a very interesting request the other day. I guess this guy was one of his biggest heroes growing up and into these 20s and 30s. Probably what's considered one of the greatest drag racers of all time, the pride of Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. Joseph said, if you could do something on him, I'd really appreciate it. And Joseph, this is for you. We do appreciate you dropping in and all the followers of the channel. So today we're going to call maybe the Canadian sports coverage out. If this guy was a hockey player, he'd be a household name, but because he was probably one of the better drag racers in history, Gordie Bonin was not really at the level of Gretzky and the other athletes of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but boys, he deserved it. He passed away, unfortunately, at the young age of 65 in Las Vegas on November 29, 2013. But again, the pride of Prince Albert had partnered with the longtime colleagues Ron Hodgson and Gordie Jenner, made up as considered one of the best Canadian drag racing teams ever. Now, Bonin was nicknamed 240 Gordie because he became the first driver to break the 240 miles per hour in the standing start quarter mile. Now, at the 1978 NHRA Summer Nationals Englishtown, he drove the bubble-up Pontiac Trans Am funny car. Now, Bonin, along with his teammates, was inducted into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame in 2000. Now, we're going to talk about the induction in the Canadian Drag Racing Hall of Fame. Again, he's legendary. Now, according to their posts on their website, cdrhf.com, he was one of drag racing's most successful funny car drivers with a 9-3 record in final round appearances at major races. Bonin was born again in Prince Albert and grew up in Red Deer, allowing him to frequently attend drag races in the hotbeds of Edmonton and Calgary. Now, he began professional drag racing as a driver of the Pacemaker Vega funny car in '72 with Hodgson and Jenner. He went on to compete with them for numerous years. Known for the bubble-up sponsored funny cars during the '79 season, the team placed as runner-up at the '72 Nationals and eventually won the national title in '79. Bonin went on to win the NHRA Division 6 funny car title every year from '75 to 1980. Now, his nickname, again, was inspired by his ability to consistently push his car beyond the 240 miles per hour barrier. In '79, he became the fourth member of the NHRA Career 5-Second Club when he flew down the quarter-mile track in a speedy 5.97 seconds. Another iconic moment was his cameo in the movie Fast Company, in which he drove his car through a garage door, paused at a red light, and sped off when the light turned green. He was the NHRA's marketing director and marketing services manager from '83 to '89. Now, he eventually went back to racing with Hodgson and Jenner, qualifying for the Seattle semifinals in 1991. Bonin also got a second-time seat with Roland Leong's Hawaiian in '93. From '94 to '95, he drove from Candies and Hughes, and he also won the Gator Nationals 3 times and the Ontario Finals twice. Again, he was inducted in the Canadian Motorsports Hall of Fame in the early 2010s. Now, we're also going to be talking in this podcast about a very, very interesting tribute by Phil Burgess, the NHRA National Dragster editor. When he found out that Gordie had passed away, he wrote a very touching story on the NHRA.com website. We're going to quote from this. Now, he was very upset by the passing, and Phil said in a write-up, "It's been 3 days since I got the news, and I still can't believe that Gordie is dead. The death of the popular funny car star last Friday took the community by surprise and by shock. The first reports coming from longtime partner Ron Hodgson that the man who most was called 240 had been found dead in his hotel room in Vegas. His Facebook post revealed that he had been at the ICU of a local hospital several times recently, but had been released. Black Friday indeed." Now, as the story goes on, I received the news that night from NHRA's Graham Light, his longtime friend, former teammate and fellow Canadian, just a few hours after he was discovered. Graham knew that primarily on a personal level, I want to know. Although everyone was Gordie's friend, there were those of us who had known and worked with him who were closer. And secondarily, that I needed to know to start spreading the sad news to the community. Before I could write the story, I sat in silence for a moment. It was a shock to my Twitter followers as it was quickly met with an echo of disbelieving repetition. Now, he died at age 65. He should have been immune to the ravages of age like the rest of us, or the physical or perhaps even mental specimen that he'd been in the 70s, but a fair-haired prince of Flopperdom and forever young. He's still the fair-haired prince of Flopperdom and forever young. 3 days later, those first thoughts still a bit raw in my emotions, so I decided to do what I always do for clarity in times like this, to seek understanding and comfort in writing about it. Now, like many young funny car fans of the 70s, he was one of my favorites. Okay, let's find some more information here. I always thought that the green Bubble Up Monza was one of the sharpest looking cars out there, and the subsequent Bubble Up Firebirds were truly fearsome speed machines that earned the Speedy nickname. I remember that I started drinking Bubble Up in high school just because of those cars. Now, Bonin seemed to have it all. He was good looking. He was blonde-haired driver of one of the era's best cars, respected by his peers and loved by the fans, especially the female ones. I'd seen him on the trek south to OCIR in Irondale, but mostly I knew him from his sister Onyx on a national event tour, especially his odd streak of every other year victories at the Gator Nationals in 77, 79, 81. I was a fan, and I rooted for him. So imagine my surprise in 83, just a year after leaving the spectator ranks to join the National Dragster staff, to find myself working with Bonin at NHRA, where he'd been hired in the marketing department. We were co-workers for 6 years, being his funny car star, and we became lifelong friends. Even after he left NHRA and returned to the cockpit where he belonged, and even in his roles after his driving career ended, we stayed in touch via email or Facebook. I saw him this year during the national event in Seattle. He was quite a bit heavier, but still had that friendly smile. We chatted. I milked him for detailed information for my favorite Fuelers column. I was writing for nationaldragster.net, and we said goodbye. I didn't know it would be the last time I would see him, or would have ended differently. Now, after the story had been posted on our website, the first person I reached out to was Roland Leon. I sent him an email that night expressing my sorrow at his loss. Bonin was, after all, the only driver of 20 to get 2 stints in Hawaiian, and I asked for an interview. I didn't want to call him that night and intrude on his grief, but I've known Roland long enough to know that he'd understand. He was my first call this morning. Now, Leon hired Bonin late in summer 73 after his operation had been stolen from the parking lot of a Holly Inn in Gary, Indiana. When he returned to LA to rebuild, his then driver Leroy Chatterton decided he had enough of the road and quit. Bonin was available after the pacemaker team of Hodgson and Gordon Jenner had parked their car for a short time, and Leon hired him. Bonin lived with Leon during this time, and he stayed together into the 1974 season before Bonin left to join the pacemaker team and was replaced by Mike Van Sant. They reunited nearly 20 years later when Leon signed a short-term deal with the Hawaiian Tourism Board, but the sponsorship ended almost after just a half season. Now, I also spoke to Hodgson and Light, who had both known Bonin for decades from their shared Canadian roots. Hodgson began his long association with Bonin when Bonin bought a Hirsch shifter from Hodgson's pacemaker automotive speed equipment business. That eventually led to their teaming on a funny car and a great success that followed for more than a decade. Gordie just had a real feel for driving funny cars, said Hodgson. We didn't have computers in the cars at the time, but Gordie was our computer. We had some great crew chiefs, guys like the late Dan Ferguson, Gordon Jenner, and Jerry Verhoeven, and Gordie was a big part of our success because of what he could share from a run. He was a drag racer from day one. Now, Gordie's enthusiasm and friendliness were appreciated by both the media and drag fans across North America. In the 40-plus years I knew him, he always had a friendly smile. And that is what I'll always remember. Now, Joey was a friend of George Plimpton as well, and he was also very big in Seattle. His Seattle fans were legion, often louder than those on the Max, Jungle, or McCullough, and he had reason to cheer. He was our wild man, our Jungle Jim of the Northwestern Canada. His 400-foot power stands at Seattle, Mission, and Portland burnouts were as big as anyone's. They were insane. He knew who he was, never forgot his roots, and he had a well-deserved and enjoyable resurgence with the recent nostalgia craze. He told me many times he had no interest in getting behind the wheel of a nostalgic car. He would laugh and say he had his time and it would never be better today than yesterday. Now, with the passing, his colleagues had said he had his eye on the return to sport even up until the time of his death. He was working various angles, including nostalgia funny cars, international tours, and more. Even if it was just wishful thinking, none of it will have a chance to come to fruition now, and maybe it's better that way, better that we can remember 240 from his glory days, for his carefree joy in life and the way he touched ours. Godspeed, friend. So, again, Mr. Mendoza can prove, a lot of people this guy had talent literally to burn. And you can see in the photos here the joy he had on his face to just be a participant in what's considered one of the most interesting sports. I've covered like polling events, but I've seen drag races on TV, and something that lasts 6 seconds. How do you cover something like that? But there's so much intrigue. Literally hundreds of hours go into that 6 seconds. And if you're a fan of drag racing and racing, you know what I'm talking about. So Joseph, this is for you, and sorry for your loss. I know we haven't talked personally, but when our heroes die, it's a great loss, not only for that person, but the persons that they influence. When John Belleville passed away, John was one of my heroes, and a lot of people in my family and friends gave me condolences knowing how much John meant to me. So, Joseph, you have my condolences. Like I said, I followed some of his career, but if all the stories and legends are true, what a Canadian classic, no pun intended. Thanks for listening. Bye.